Good day, everyone, and thanks so much for joining the McAllen Cable Network. I'm Roxanne Lerma. Now, today we're back in the studio, and we're talking about Weekend Warriors. So, what exactly is that? Well, it's our Texas State Guard. To help us out with that, we're joined by First Lieutenant Stephen Walker. Thank you so much for joining us, our Operations Officer.
Yes, ma'am.
Sergeant Juan Trevino, our team leader. And last but certainly not least, Vanessa Malta, and you're a private first class and in charge of public affairs, correct?
Correct.
Excellent. Okay, so Texas State Guard, what is it?
Well, first, Roxanne, I'd like to thank you for having us here. This is a
very
real
welcome.
opportunity for us to be a little more exposed to the public and show the people in McAllen, especially, and the Lower Rio Grande Valley who we are. But the Texas State Guard, the best reference for what we are is we're part of a three-legged stool. You're aware of the National Guard. A lot of people confuse us with the National Guard, and we're not a lot different. But there's also the Air National Guard, and then there's the Texas State Guard. All three make a three-legged stool that is considered the Texas Military Forces. We are the Texas Military Forces in one of those three, and our Commander-in-Chief is the Governor of Texas, Governor Rick Perry. We answered when we're called up for what's considered state active duty during times of emergency. Past emergencies have been in McAllen. I'll give an example: Hurricane Dolly, Hurricane Alex. Those were basically the two last hurricanes that we experienced. Dolly was in 2004, Alex was in 2008. We actually were operational here in McAllen and ran shelters in the area. So our job, technically, is one, to evacuate people from what we consider ground zero. For example, let's say that a new hurricane was coming in this summer, and that it was going to be hitting the South Texas coast and the South Padre and Brownsville area. We would actually offer evacuation for people in those areas, and we would evacuate them to safe areas. For example, that could be Kelly Air Force Base, Texarkana, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin. It could be Houston or even Corpus Christi. It would be to get people out of harm's way. And once they're evacuated, what we do is we provide shelter situations for them. So we also run and operate those shelters. We track whoever we pick up. People are welcome to bring their pets. That's been an issue in the past, so we do take pets. We keep families together, and we evacuate them from that ground zero to areas that they're safe, clean, and operational, and that's usually ran by Texas State Guard members.
Okay, so if we were going to talk about a mission statement, what exactly would that be, Private?
Mission-ready military forces to state and local authorities in times of emergency. We also provide homeland security and community service activities under the umbrella of the defense support of civil authorities. And we also augment the Texas Army National Guard and the Texas Air National Guard.
Okay, so I think that there's probably some operations that people are super familiar with, and so let's talk about some of those.
Sure. We were involved in several operations. Probably the most popular one is Operation Lone Star.
And that's a big one.
Yes, and we do that every year, and the 3rd Battalion, which is located in the Valley, is always involved with that because they're serving the indigent population throughout South Texas, and we provide critical health care for those people because sometimes that's the only health care that they are able to get every year.
Okay, so when we're talking about critical health care, what exactly is that? What services are provided?
Usually dental programs, eye care assistance, diabetic care, general medical assistance. It's not very, very detailed, but it just provides some general medical care for the people that otherwise wouldn't have any.
And you have an amazing turnout for that. I mean, because our local media covers that each and every year because it's such a big operation.
Oh yeah, and we have medical people come from all over the state to assist in that area.
Okay.
One of the other operations that we're involved in, and this is our core operation, is shelter care, as Lieutenant Walker was mentioning earlier.
And I don't think that people really know that. You know, Texas State Guard shelter mass care, so what is that?
Essentially what we do is we provide evacuation, tracking, and sheltering and feeding for people who are affected by an impact zone, for example, a hurricane. We may set up a shelter at a school gymnasium. We did it at Memorial High School during Hurricane Alex. We've done some at Pan Am during Hurricane Dolly. And we just provide a place for people to go to, a safe place for people to go to during a storm.
Okay, so what I find really interesting is, you know, the term weekend warrior. You guys work, you know, Monday through Friday, and then let's, you know, God forbid, say that we have a huge hurricane here in South Texas, then you get called out.
Yes, ma'am. By the governor of Texas. He's the one that will pull that trigger and activate. The Texas State Guard is statewide. There's units from one end of the state to the other. We have air operations. We have Army operations, which is what we represent. We have what's called TMAR, Texas Maritime. They're more aquatic. They also focus on wildfires and help put those out. But we have each kind of an area of expertise that we look into and actually are responsible for. Army, we do the shelter, evacuations, and the tracking. That's what Sergeant Trevino was telling us, that that was one of our core items. But there are a lot of other things that we do. For example, we may be called up, for example, the oral rabies vaccination program.
That's another big one for you guys.
Right, it is. Operation Lone Star, we just recently, last summer, did one that was Operation Thunderstorm Spiral. And this is where we actually work hand in hand with the Homeland Security and the Border Patrol, and we actually test and help them look at products and existing products that they have on their electronic nets that maintain and security on the border.
Oh, okay.
So we get to do that. There's also Operation Border Star. And this is where actually some of our members are embedded with the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas Rangers, and we help them in resource management and information exchange.
So you guys are kind of like jack of all trades.
Yes, ma'am. Anything we're called up to do, we're able to do that. We are truly, in a sense, the citizen soldier, because we do have day jobs and we do report to the governor of Texas. There are 38 states in the United States that actually have this state militia that's called up by the governors. And there is a possibility that we could serve out of the state of Texas if the governor of Texas and the governor of, say, Louisiana have an agreement, a reciprocity, where we could be called in to help them in multiplying their forces to assist in any kind of emergency. So we are flexible like that. Anything that we're called up to do, we basically think on our feet and get the job done.
Excellent. Okay, so Sergeant, tell me a little bit more about the oral rabies vaccination clinic, because again, that's a big one for you.
Yes, it is. The 3rd Battalion in the Valley has been in the forefront of that operation for several years now. And what we do essentially is we distribute about 2 million oral rabies vaccines throughout South and West Texas to help eliminate the problem with rabies in the wild. And our soldiers essentially would supply air support and ground crew support for that operation every year.
Okay, so Private, you have your regular, your day job, and this is something that you do extra and on the weekends. So when do you guys find time for training?
Well, typically our schedule is every 3rd weekend of the month. It's starting Friday evening. It can start Friday evening, Saturday, and sometimes Sunday mornings. It's every month. We drill rain or shine. We do cover the areas of Hidalgo County all the way up to Corpus Christi and Brownsville. So any of your crews can report to our headquarters.
Do you have some pretty in-depth training?
Yes, ma'am, we do. In fact, what I'd like to do is maybe go through the list.
Sure, let's
to
do
give you
it.
kind of a spectrum of what we actually do.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked about the shelter management, the evacuation, and the shelter management where we're in the shelter itself. We evacuate people away from ground zero. We also have a tracking system that during Katrina, we found that some people and families were separated. So all this really is just a barcode. It's nothing more than what you'd see at H-E-B when you buy a product, but it scans it and it gives a code.
And you're in charge of this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Because when we bring family onto a bus and we take them to another location, we want to know that we've kept them together and that they're safe, that they've arrived. If the bus takes a wrong turn, we can even contact that bus driver and say, hey, you're not going to Kelly Air Force Base, you're supposed to be going to Carswell Air Force Base. To help shelter. Or it could be a town. It could be a city like Houston, a church, anything that we shelter in. Even some of the high schools, we shelter in gymnasiums. But we do that as well as the pods. Pods is called points of distribution. And this is where when the hurricanes pass and people are repatriated and they go back home, their water systems may be down, the food stores may be depleted, so we actually bring in food, ice, and water. And we distribute that in a very organized manner. We'll set up a pods distribution center. The trucks will come in and we'll pull them out of the trucks and load them onto the cars, then the cars are able to go home. As part of that, we have forklift operators. So we train, every one of us is a certified forklift operator to be able to unload and load.
That's interesting.
It's a small thing, right? But we also do, search and rescue. For example, if the hurricane came through and there's people trapped or injured, we may go in and do a search and rescue. We may be asked to go in and do a damage assessment. They don't know the damage, let's say in Brownsville. We go in and run a grid. We're downloading that information on GPS, and we've got direct contact with the headquarters where they can actually see what the damage is and what resources they need to send in immediately. So we give them those eyes on the ground, okay? We do traffic control training. If we're having traffic problems, we can get out and direct traffic. It sounds like a simple thing, but a lot of times you can talk to the PD, and it's really
it's
not.
not a simple thing when you're at an intersection and
Right.
the light's gone down or something. You know?
We train our people on ethics, sexual harassment. That's a big thing for us. We want to make sure that we stay, respectful to each other as well as the community that we work for. First aid, defibrillator, CPR, child CPR, whatever's needed there. Wide area search and rescue, we talked about that. The scanning is what we call the TETN. It's the Texas Emergency Transportation Network. That's that system that we do that, and that's interbased on a computer system. So we
I
train.
think that you don't really think about something like that, but that's vital.
Right.
Like you said, it's a simple bracelet, it's a barcode, but you don't separate mom and child or what have you.
Right. And this is a military organization. We do abide by the Military Code of Justice. We do have drill and ceremony. That's learning how to march. That's learning, who you salute, who you don't salute, the courtesies, the traditions of the military. We do train on that. PT, physical training.
Yeah.
We
not
do
my
have
favorite.
we do have some standards. We have to have that because we want to know that our people are in shape, that we're not having to pick each other up in the field during an emergency. So there is some physical requirements. You don't have to come in shape. We're welcome to have you, but we will work with you to get back into shape as long as you're showing improvement.
Okay, so speaking of some of the enlistment requirements, how about we go through some of those?
Sure.
You have to be a resident of the state of Texas, age 17 to 60, so that's
It's a pretty broad range.
that's a reasonable good health. You got to pass your criminal background check, valid driver's license, and here's an interesting one. I see you guys in uniform, and I automatically assume military. Definitely have military background, but that's not a requirement.
No, not at all. It helps. If you have a military background, you should have, one of the requirements is that you have a honorable discharge to be able to join the State Guard.
Okay.
But prior military is not a requirement.
And there's no educational requirement either?
High school education.
Okay.
One thing about the State Guard is that, if you come in and you say, well, I can't really join because I've got diabetes. If the diabetes are in control and you're able to monitor it and manage it, that's fine for us. You would still qualify to be able to get in.
Okay.
Or anything like that. As long as you're in good health where you can get out and do things in the field, and there will be days that you need to do that. As long as you can manage your health and be able to do that, you'd be just fine.
So we're actually looking for a few good people, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So tell us about that.
Well, the reason that we're here is because we're in a position in our lives that we're ready to give back to the state of Texas. Personally, I can tell you my story, 9/11. I was sitting on the couch thinking, I'm not going to be here and just watch this. I'm going to be a part of it where I can assist and help the state of Texas. So if the flag goes up, I want to be in a position where I can contribute. And most people that are in the unit or in the organization statewide have the same mind frame. So when you're in the group of people that have that same mind frame, you're in a group of good people.
Excellent. Okay, so can you explain the differences? Because you hear Texas State Guard, and I think it's probably synonymous with the National Guard. So, but there's some clear differences.
Yes, definitely. As the lieutenant mentioned earlier, our commander-in-chief is the governor of the state. We cannot be federalized, so we do not leave the borders of the state. We're not available for overseas deployment.
Okay.
Essentially, we're here to serve the residents of the state of Texas.
Okay. Excellent.
But let me get into a couple other things. We're talking about some of the training. To reinforce that this is a military organization, we do encourage our members to get a concealed carry license, although we don't carry firearms. That would not be the case on most cases completely. But we still expect people to be proficient in small arms. That's one of the things that we try to train on and one of the disciplines that we think that our members should have. Other items that could come up that's kind of intense for us but could happen, it's pretty rare. For example, oil spill. they recently had an oil spill in
Right.
Houston. We could be called up to go and do cleanup on that, and we've been trained to do so. So, these types of operations we see well within our scope of deployments.
It's super diverse because we were talking with the captain earlier also, and space shuttle. I mean,
We actually, when the space shuttle came down, its debris field actually went across the state of Texas, unfortunately. And there was a call up to the units to go out and help recover some of those pieces that actually the debris field when it fell across the state. And a lot of material was picked up across the state by Texas State Guardsmen. Our search and rescue training and our grid patterns that we're actually able to provide was one of the more beneficial reasons that they were actually able to lock in on some of that. So again, it's whatever the governor of Texas sees his needs for is when he calls us up. So it could be a variety of things.
okay, so it's a lot of community outreach. I mean, it could be disaster relief, it could be a space shuttle, it could be a number of things, Operation Lone Star. So if somebody is sitting at home and thinking, maybe I'm interested in doing this, what's your message? Why should they?
Well, again, it's for someone that is in a position to where they feel like they want to be part of something that's bigger than just themselves. And being an organization that's very disciplined, very challenging. When you join the organization, you're expected to get online and take some online classes, FEMA, for example. We all have a FEMA qualification at some point in time. We even have badges that we wear that shows your level of qualifications in the FEMA organization. And we want to be aware of that because when we go into an emergency situation, the framework that it's operated in is the FEMA framework. And so all of us should be able to go in and participate in any part of that we're asked to do so. So again, you're on a continuous learning curve. You're challenged continuously with new items and new things to master. And again, there's rank, there's structure, so it's getting to know that and then getting to go out with the group of people that have the same mind frame. So I would say that's really the reason to join, in my opinion.
Yeah,
maybe
and
the
our
surgeon
objective here today is to speak to your audience and help us increase our numbers. Our goal for 2014 is to double the size of our battalion in the Valley.
What size is it now?
It's in the low 30s.
Okay.
And the more people we have, the more resources we can provide to the citizens of the state of Texas, and not as much of the burden is borne by each individual soldier when you can spread the work around to more people.
So aside from the emotional and personal bonus, you seem to get a lot out of it, like a forklift operator or the FEMA training. There's a lot that comes with it.
Yeah, we get some medical training and first aid training, CPR training every year. We review or renew our certification in those areas.
Okay.
Which leads us to, I don't know if you were going to talk about the type of people we want on board.
So we're looking for diverse types of people. It's not just we want soldiers per se, but we do want people that have different backgrounds. Either it be the non-military, we do want to look for attorneys. There's medical, can be any from nurse practitioners to doctors. We do have people who also who've been in rescue. There's also chaplains. We do look for people with specific religious training.
Okay, so looking for a diverse background. And lastly, to close it out, if somebody is interested and they want to know more about the Texas State Guard, where do they go? Is there a website, a number?
There is a website. It's txsg.state.tx.us. Or there's a local recruiter. We have a local recruiter available. It's 956-994-0000. And that would get them in touch with people directly with the 3rd Battalion. That's out of the Weslaco Armory. But before we go, I'd like to bring up 2 other things.
Sure.
And I feel like it's important. We also work with a lot of local emergency management groups. For example, Red Cross, the Salvation Army, the DPS, the Texas Department of Transportation. So we actually work with other people that we'd see during an emergency event on a training basis. So again, you get to know those people, you get to interact with them on an annual basis. So when the flag does go up, you're not introduced to a different group of people. You kind of know who you're going to be running with. So. At least for the Rio Grande Valley.
At least for the Rio Grande Valley.
And by the way, being bilingual for us is a real bonus.
That's a plus.
And a bigger bonus is if you're female. Because in a shelter environment, you get a bunch of guys in uniform in an environment where you've got women and children. having a female there softens it, and she also has a lot better access to some of the things that guys don't really as sensitive as we should be.
Hence, you were trying to recruit me before we started here.
You would look good in uniform.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for joining us in the studio, Private Sergeant Lieutenant. And at home, if you are interested in being a weekend warrior, perhaps an unsung hero, then reach out to the Texas State Guard. For the City of McAllen, I'm Roxanne Lerma.
Thank you very much.